Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of ICU. You have me all to yourselves today. I do not have a guest. I was going to have a guest, and then something came up in my personal life and it just didn't work out. So, the next few weeks, we will have guests on the show. But today, it is just the two of us, I guess, if you want to put it like that. We're going to be talking about the best approach for interstitial cystitis, and we'll talk about some of the mistakes that I see in the IC community and probably a few other things as well, but we're going to keep this episode pretty brief. So if you are living with interstitial cystitis, you know how challenging it can be to manage the pain, the urgency, and any other symptoms that typically come with this wonderful condition that we're all suffering from. A mistake that I commonly see IC warriors making is honing in on one potential trigger, such as diet, and completely overlooking all other potential triggers. Okay. You might be thinking, yep, I do this. Or you may not think that you do it. And maybe later on in this episode, you'll realize, oh crap, I am doing that. So, why I wanted to do this episode was one, because I'm just seeing so many people that are thinking diet is their main problem, and it usually is not. And I just really wanted to talk more about potential root causes that are not diet related. So moving towards the non-diet related root causes / triggers. Sometimes I use that word interchangeably. So for example, a lot of my road to remission clients come to me, and not only are they severely restricting themselves, their diet, they are sometimes showing signs of nutrient deficiencies. A lot of them have issues with significant weight loss. And a lot of them, I would say the majority of them, are struggling with food fear or stress and anxiety surrounding eating, whatever you want to call it. Food and eating just is not a pleasurable experience for you. And they come into the program thinking, I'm probably pretty diet sensitive, or I'm very diet sensitive. And they've been essentially thinking that food is their issue because that is the one thing that we have the most control over. So if you flare, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be like, well, what did I eat earlier today? Or what did I eat yesterday? Could it have been that drink that I had? I don't know. And you start to ask all these questions, and you're kind of grasping at straws. Like, could it have been this? Could it have been this like very, very small amount of this ingredient in that one drink I had a really tiny amount of? Like, I see this happening to so many people, as you grasp at straws and you don't even know for sure if the food or beverage was what triggered your flare. And so many of my clients come in thinking they are diet sensitive and kind of in this situation, and they go through the elimination diet and they learn that diet is not their biggest issue. Okay. That being said, for the people out there with Hunner's lesions, so 5 to 10% of people with IC have Hunner's lesions, these people are anecdotally more diet sensitive. So this is kind of, you're in your own category. I do have people with Hunner's lesions in my program, and they're a bit variable when it comes to diet sensitivity, but I would say they are on the spectrum leaning more towards being very diet sensitive. That being said, we help our clients to conduct that elimination diet. And I'm a huge advocate for doing some sort of elimination diet, because that can help you to identify, okay, am I diet sensitive or am I not diet sensitive? If yes, we want to know where you land on this spectrum of diet sensitivity. This is a spectrum that I'm just making up. So on the one end, there is people who are not diet sensitive at all. And then on the other end, there are people that are extremely diet sensitive. That's kind of where the Hunner's lesions people are hanging. And so most people with IC land somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. And it's in my professional observation that most people are leaning more towards not being diet sensitive. And I recently, actually this morning, the day that I'm recording this is Wednesday, May 3rd. This episode's going to come out following Wednesday, May 10th. I was listening to Jill Osborne's Facebook Live, and she was just at a conference that it might have been an AUA conference. I don't know if it had a specific name, but she was talking about all of the findings and the new research at this convention that they held with, all the doctors, the top IC researchers. And if you haven't watched that yet, I would recommend going on Facebook, go to the Interstitial Cystitis Network page, and you should find that in Facebook Live. It's really eye-opening, and it makes me excited that we're getting that much closer to getting some answers. She talked quite a bit about subtyping and phenotyping, and I do believe in the fact that there are so many different subtypes when it comes to IC. Now, whether it's 3, like the UCLA study proposed, or is it 9, like Dr. Nickel, I believe is his name, Curtis Nickel, is proposing. Well, we don't know that for sure yet, but the American Urologic Association, in their most recent update to the guidelines for treating and diagnosing IC, they went with 3 subtypes, which is, better than we were before. So the point of me telling you this is, 1, go watch it. And 2, it's showing that people really aren't as bladder wall centric as we thought we were. And the majority of people with IC are actually suffering from a pelvic floor issue. And it'll all make sense once you go watch it. I might even be able to link to this in the show notes, but it's really great. I would recommend at least watching the first 30 minutes, but the first 60 minutes, that's what I watched at least, were really helpful. And basically, the conclusion that I drew from the summary of the research that she talked about was that I'm pretty sure I'm right in my hypothesis that most people with IC aren't as diet sensitive as we thought we were. And I think this is a really great direction to move, because I believe that once more people start talking about this, there's more research, the food fear, that level of food fear will drop. I really believe that. And I see a ton of people on Facebook support groups asking questions like, is this brand of cottage cheese safe for the bladder? And every time I see a question like that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, people just don't understand that we're all so different, and there isn't one diet for IC. I mean, yeah, we have the IC diet, but that's just all anecdotal evidence. That's what people perceived as being sensitive to their bladders. And so it's really interesting, the direction that we're moving. I feel like I just got lost in my thoughts there. I was talking about Facebook and, okay. The people who are kind of like letting what other people say dictate the way that they think about food and their symptoms. So what I mean by that is, I'm a huge believer in we can manifest physical symptoms through our thoughts. And a lot of you may have experienced this before. If you have gotten really anxious before a meal, or really stressed, and you're nervous about maybe trying a new food, you can actually put yourself into a flare that was caused by stress and not actually the food. This is so common that people are just drawing the conclusion that it's the food, and they're completely overlooking some other trigger. So in this scenario, stress. Stress is probably the number one most common trigger among my road to remission clients. And sometimes it takes doing an elimination diet to rule out whether diet is an issue. Okay. And another important thing during the elimination is having support, because if you have food fear and it's really not budging, trying to reintroduce those foods and testing those foods during the elimination diet isn't going to be successful, most likely. So if you're able to work with a registered dietitian like myself, or some other dietitian who has some IC experience, that would be ideal. Also, if you're suffering from anxiety with eating that might be borderline an eating disorder, disordered eating, whatever you want to call it, or it's just getting in the way of your progress with getting more variety back in your diet. I mean, I'd recommend reaching out to a mental health professional. Um, they are trained to help with this sort of thing, and some I'm sure are more specialized than others. So that is my recommendation if you're really struggling. Um, I also did an episode of this podcast. It was the last episode of season 1 with an intuitive eating dietitian. That was really great. We talked about food fear and how to kind of break through that. Um, but yeah, food fear is just such a unfortunately common issue that people in our community are dealing with. And I believe if we start putting, if we start talking more about this emerging research, and we start to prioritize interventions such as pelvic floor physical therapy, and we start to figure more out about these subtypes, and we start talking about it in these support groups and on social media, it might start to change people's mindset about food, and it might help them feel more confident and less scared when it comes to adding that variety back into your diet. So today is just the day of tangents. The main thing that I wanted to discuss today is the best approach to identify your triggers / root cause. And another thing that Jill Osborne said in her Facebook Live was our population is heterogeneous, which means we are all so different. And that's what makes this such a complex condition. And so when it comes to getting relief from your symptoms, your journey is probably going to look completely different from my journey or the next person and the next person. You kind of have to stay in your own lane, because we all have very different symptoms. We all respond very differently to treatments. We have varying levels of diet sensitivity. And we all have different medical histories, lifestyles. There's so many factors that go into each of our individual puzzles that just goes to show you really can't lump yourself in with other IC warriors. I mean, we can't compare ourselves to one another because we are just so different. And so, in my opinion, the best approach to identify your root cause to get relief from your symptoms is a holistic one. So what I mean by this is that rather than focusing solely on one potential trigger or just treating the symptoms of IC, kind of like a Band-Aid solution, think like pre-leaf, medications, etc. A holistic approach considers the whole person. So that includes diet, lifestyle, emotions, and more to uncover the underlying causes of IC and develop a personalized plan for healing. And in my experience, once you're able to investigate and identify that root cause or causes, because there could be more than one, that is when you will more than likely get relief. Okay, so what I mean by these root causes, so I'm talking things like stress, which I've already mentioned, diet, same thing, hormones. Hormones are a pretty common trigger for people with pelvic pain and bladder symptoms. Um, did I say allergies? I don't know. Allergies. So environmental allergies, there could be a mast cell histamine component. So that could be an issue. Overlapping conditions. So think pelvic floor dysfunction, think vulvodynia, think IBS, other conditions that can their symptoms can exacerbate IC symptoms. So realizing that it may not be one trigger, but it could be many triggers. I mean, it totally could be one, and if it is, that's fantastic. Um, there's a lot of people who are getting diagnosed with IC and finding out that they really just had pelvic floor dysfunction, or they had endometriosis and they just didn't realize it until they had a laparoscopy. So interstitial cystitis, as I talked last week with Dr. Janelle, the vagina rehab doctor, we're talking about how interstitial cystitis really just is defined as or irritation to your bladder wall, and it's unexplained. And so those of us who have these bladder symptoms like frequency, urgency, pain, if there's no other cause that our doctors can identify, that's when we get slapped with this IC diagnosis. And so we really just need to find what is at the root of our unique symptoms. So for me, for example, and this took me a really, really long time to figure out because I had nobody to lean on throughout my journey until the past few years. So that's why it really took me a long time. But I figured out that stress is my main trigger. And when I'm stressed, I don't always know it, but I I get a little panicky, but sometimes when I'm stressed and I'm out in public, or if I'm just, sitting here recording something, I'll feel my pelvic floor muscles tense up. And in a few hours, or actually right away sometimes, I will notice that I have a flare up, which for me looks like pain in my bladder that gets worse when I urinate. And then it lasts about 20 to 30 minutes afterwards, just like severe burning pain. And I was able to identify that through an investigative process. I learned that I'm really not diet sensitive. My nervous system just appears to be stuck in fight or flight. Um, haven't had any big trauma in my life, just a bunch of like smaller traumas that do add up. And I think that just having anxiety, a history of anxiety in my family, I've always been an anxious person. When I was a kid, I suffered from IBS so bad. And my parents always told me that I was a really colicky baby. And I was like, well, maybe I also had bladder pain at that point. Who knows? But I know that I was a very anxious kid and very shy. You would never believe it, but I was very shy. And so from a young age, I have always had some sort of nervous system issue or issue with anxiety. And once I was able to identify that and start working on managing my stress, so going to therapy, I'm actually on a antidepressant. I've been for years and years and years finding things that calm me down. So I like to do bar classes, um, maybe 4 to 5 times a week, petting my dog. So things that are calming to me. And that's really something that is individualized as well. Um, so that has been huge for me. And while pelvic floor dysfunction is another major issue for me, if I'm not consciously working on my stress management and minimizing that stress, the pelvic floor PT isn't as effective. My mindset has to be like almost perfect for me for everything to just line up. And that's kind of how I got to be 95% pain free. And yeah, that's my journey. And that's kind of my root cause that I'm aware of. It's just stress is a tough thing to get rid of. We live in a very stressful world. I mean, I don't have to say that or explain that to any of you. You already know it. And I guarantee the large majority of you also deal with some form of stress. So working on that has been huge for me. But if I do have a stressful day or moment, I can flare up. And that's why I kind of leave that 5% of time that I do still have flares. So full transparency there, not 100% cured by any means, but this is the best I've ever done in my entire life with IC. I've had, like I said, a lot of clients find that diet isn't the issue. So finding stress is an issue, hormones. My client Amy that I had on a few weeks ago, she, like I said, thought she was really, really diet sensitive. She ended up finding out that stress and hormones are her two main triggers. And she's kind of in the same boat as me in terms of stress, finding ways to minimize that. And in terms of hormones, she knows that keeping track of her menstrual cycle is really essential to live the life that she wants to live. So she knows, okay, these 2 days of the month are usually my worst. These are when I flare up. I'm going to prepare for that. I'm not going to have any, a ton of the 2 or 3 things that she's sensitive to in terms of her diet. She's going to try to minimize her stress during those days, not wear any uncomfortable clothes. So taking those precautions to really minimize the effects of her symptoms. She's also working on seed cycling, which we talked about in this podcast before. She's seeing some pretty good results with that. And she does consider herself to be in remission now, which is really cool. And she's added over 20 foods back in her diet. I had a client named Debbie who was also eating super restrictive diet for months out of fear of causing a flare. And after 3 months of the elimination diet, she learned she has no diet sensitivity at all. And her main triggers or her root cause was a few things. And I'm trying to remember, but I remember she struggled with bacterial vaginosis, I believe. I don't want to be wrong. And stress was another big one for her. And vulvodynia. Those were her big ones. My other client, Jackie, so she found that pelvic floor dysfunction was a big one for her, hormones, and then 2, maybe 3 diet items. My client, Nina, figured out that pelvic floor dysfunction was her biggest trigger. She's also in remission, same as Jackie. So just goes to show that these people are investigating their root cause, they are finding it, and they are either removing that from their lifestyle or they're treating it if it is a medical thing. And they are out there living their best lives. They feel confident when it comes to their IC. And really, that's because I designed Road to Remission to take a holistic approach and take into account things outside of diet. Like, yes, I am a dietitian. That's what I'm trained to do. But we put a heavy emphasis on the non-diet triggers in both our education course and during our group calls. We educate a lot about non-diet triggers and ways to minimize those. And we talk a lot at our support calls every week about more unconventional triggers. So recently we've been talking a lot about pudendal neuralgia. We've been talking about endometriosis. We've been talking about all things pelvic floor, maybe like laundry detergent being like a scented detergent could be an issue as well. So we do talk a lot about things outside of diet in those support calls. And I really do believe that the combination of the diet, the education course, which is a 12-week online self-paced education course, essentially, where I give you all of the up-to-date research and educate you on everything you need to know about IC, teaching about those triggers, but then also talking to your peers about them and talking about everyone's experiences and what is working for them, what isn't working for them, what they found to be a trigger for them, maybe that is more unconventional that you wouldn't typically think about. Um, these are just a few examples that I gave of clients who, came to us thinking they're diet sensitive, they're really not, and they're doing really well. I mean, I truly believe we are not as diet sensitive as we think we are. I think food gets demonized in our community, and there's many reasons for that. I just think that there's this huge fear of the unknown. Like, oh crap, what if what I ate was the reason I had that flare? Or what if I consume this at dinner later and it flares me? Like, I have this event coming up this weekend. Like, there's just a lot of fear and there's a lot of unknowns with this condition. And that's why, putting your detective hat on and really investigating and starting to track things, tracking what you're eating, what you're drinking, your pain levels, your bathroom habits, bowel movement, stress, hormones, all of those things, is really helpful to identify patterns and help you get that much closer to identifying your root cause. So that is what we help our clients do inside Road to Remission. It is a really awesome program. It's unique in the fact that we offer lifetime support. I think that's a really big benefit for our clients. And that's because IC is still currently defined as a chronic illness, or it's in the category of chronic illnesses. And, people do go into remission, but a lot of those people come out of remission. And, you could identify your root cause, but they're like me, if you have stress, you could always get back into a flare that you are having trouble getting out of. You could have another trigger come on that you weren't aware of. I mean, there's so many unknowns, and that's why we offer lifetime support, which basically means we're not a program that, gives you 3 months to finish all the program material, get your diet done, and then we kick you out. We don't do that because of the chronic nature of this condition. We welcome our members to stay in the group as long as they want. We have clients who have been with us for more than 2 years now. We have people who are just starting out in their elimination diet journey, an investigative journey, and that mix of people on our support calls is phenomenal. Like, there is nothing else like it. It's really, really great. And just the support that you can get on these calls is truly unmatched and inside of our Facebook group. So that is something that makes our program very unique. And I don't know if anyone's told you, but we conducted a study a couple months ago at the end of 2022, and we asked our clients who were past the 3-month mark in our program, what was your overall quality of life like before Road to Remission, and what is it now at 3 months? And their quality of life increased from a 3.75 out of 10 to a 7.85 out of 10. So that more than doubled in just 3 months. Imagine what your quality of life is right now, and then double that. And that's what your life could look like in 3 months. So the other really amazing statistic was 60% of our clients considered themselves to either be in remission or very close to remission after just 3 months in this program. So clients are getting really, really epic results. This program is unlike anything else. I can't say that enough. If you want to work with if you want to work with someone who truly gets it, because not only am I one of 2 IC dietitians in the world, but I'm also an IC warrior. I've suffered from this my whole life. I get it. Let me tell you, I eat, sleep, and breathe IC. So if you're looking to work with somebody who can guide you, support you, cheer you on, hold you accountable, I'm your girl. You can apply to work with me now at the link in the show notes. I am opening up 7 new spots for the month of May inside of Road to Remission. And one of those spots have already been snagged up. So definitely don't wait on this. It's a really great opportunity if you're someone looking to get big results in a short period of time. So just 3 months. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this episode. I will talk to you next week, and make sure you're following me on socials so that you don't miss anything, and enjoy the rest of your week.